y'all, I'm Alicia, and today I'm going to be discussing A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. For those of you who don't know, it is about a girl named Harper who gets magically transported from DC, where she lives in the US, to a magical fantasy world when she gets kidnapped by someone from that magical world. And it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling where she has to fall in love with the prince in a certain amount of days before the season is over. And if she doesn't, the prince will transform into a beast and kill people. And yeah, so that is the premise of the book. If that interests you, go read it before you watch this because it will be spoilery. So if you haven't read it, goodbye. And if you have, stay and we can discuss. Let's just get into it. So number one, the thing that I love most about this book is that the cerebral palsy representation, I think, was well done. I can't speak to the accuracy of the diagnosis because I don't have CP and I don't know anyone else personally who has CP, so I can't speak to the, authenticity of the disorder itself. But I mean, given just like how the book dealt with disability in general, I really liked it. And just right in the first chapter, we know that it states that Harper isn't fast or strong like other girls, and that's okay. Like, she's still very resourceful and she's still very capable of being a badass heroine, even though she's not as physically capable. And the fact that it's urban fantasy is actually so refreshing. I went into this thinking it was a high fantasy, but it isn't. Like, half of it, not half of it, like a small portion of it, like, happens in DC. And she's obviously from the real world and she gets transported into this fantasy world, so she knows nothing about it. She knows as much as we do. And it was just really refreshing because I've never seen that take on Beauty and the Beast before. So yeah, I really liked that aspect. There's also this line going back to the disability rep where Lilith is like, I can take away the torment of your broken body. And Harper is like, my body's not broken. And I was like, yes, bitch, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I love that line so much. I'm gonna go over the other things that I really liked about this book before I get into the aspects that I didn't like so much, because I would probably rate this book a 3 out of 5. Not my favorite. Like, it was good, but it wasn't as good as I was expecting, and I think there was a few areas that fell flat for me. So I'm just gonna cover what I did like and then get into what I didn't. So one of the things I actually liked was Ren's dragon form is so freaking cute. It reminded me of Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. If anyone's watched that, he's adorable, and it kind of reminded me of that when he wasn't like aggressive toward Harper. So yeah, that aspect was cool. Building off of that, I just really liked the concept of Ren when he turns into his beast form, slaughters his own people. Like, he loses himself and slaughters everyone completely, and he killed his family, and like the amount of guilt that that character must be feeling is wow. Like, I just really enjoyed that concept so much. There was so much room for depth there and for characterization and just so emotional and like so much tension. And yeah, so I liked the concept. I don't necessarily like all of the ways that it was executed, but yeah, the author gets like an A+ for concept. I like how Gray and Harper had an easier time building a relationship in the beginning than Harper and Ren did, because Ren is like very closed off and he doesn't share a lot, and I think he's just guarding himself after having been rejected so many times, right? Like, I love the line where Harper, says, have you ever loved any of the girls? Because he's like, oh yeah, none of them have loved me. And she's like, what about you? Love goes both ways. So yeah, I really like that line, and I just really enjoy Ren's attitude, and it really did stop his relationship with Harper from progressing in the beginning. And I did like I don't know, how like accurate that felt to both their characters, that they wouldn't have an automatic relationship. That being said, I don't understand the hype around this book. Like, it has such good reviews. Like, it has such high ratings. Everyone loves it. And for me, it was good, but it wasn't great. And I'm going to go over a couple of the reasons why. It felt like there was more telling than showing throughout the entire book. And because of this, I just felt like it lacked a lot of depth, a lot of characterization. It didn't, I wasn't invested. It wasn't that emotional. At least, when I was reading it, I wasn't that emotionally invested. So I don't know if that was just me, but that's how I felt reading this book. I really didn't understand the chemistry between Harper and Ren. Like, I didn't believe that they were actually in love by the end of the book at all, because they barely talked throughout the whole book. Like, I honestly would have rather Harper had a relationship with Gray, which I don't think is going to happen in the series, and honestly, like, I'm not leaning toward them anymore, just based on, like, the last half of the book. But yeah, I didn't believe that either one of them was in love over that short amount of time where they barely talked, and yeah, no. I also really didn't like the relationship shown between Jake and Harper. Jake is her brother, and it just felt not close enough. I don't know, like, I know not all siblings have close relationships, but you would think based on like her desire to go back to their world, that you know there would be more there. But overall, like he just like treated her like she was small, needed to be shoved into a back room and protected, and never let her do anything by herself, and thought kind of very little of her. And and she didn't even know a lot about him. Like he hid his relationship, he hid a lot of what he was doing, and I didn't feel like it was that well shown, like their relationship. Like I wanted it to be really, really close, the way that Harper kept describing their relationship, but it just didn't feel like that at all. And overall, the plot just felt very predictable. Like nothing out of the ordinary or nothing surprising happened. Like there were no scenes that really stood out to me or where I was like, oh my god, like I need to read where this is going next. So yeah, it was a very breezy read. It was very easy, very enjoyable throughout. Like it wasn't hard to read by any means, but I just felt like there wasn't a lot of substance there. The villains were also very weak. Like Lilith is evil for the sake of being evil. Like I don't think she had a strong enough motivation to go after Ren, make him kill his entire family, ruin the rest of his life, and like stay in the kingdom long enough to torment everyone and kill everyone in it. Like just all like it's all because of that rejection from that one night stand. Like I just don't understand that aspect of it, and I don't know. Like I get that it's a fairy tale retelling, and a lot of villains in fairy tale, not just retellings, but original fairy tales don't like. Sometimes their motivations aren't that strong. They are just evil for the sake of being evil. They're just evil people. But I wanted something more from this, and I didn't get it. I personally like villains that are very morally gray, and like you're kind of conflicted because on the one side you feel bad for them, and the other side you're like, you can't do that because you're evil, and that's, you know, obviously you're making poor choices. But Lilith was, again, she didn't have any motivation, no backstory to make the reader feel bad for her, so it just felt very black and white. Like there's no morally gray, questionable area, and I just didn't like that aspect. Even the Queen of Still Shallow was like barely in the book, and I think she's going to get more page time in the next two books, but yeah, so far the villains are kind of weak in my opinion. I feel like I'm nitpicking everything about this book, but I was so disappointed in Gray and Ren's relationship. Like you would think that after they'd survived like these horrendous, you know, seasons repeated and repeated over and over again, like they've survived that together, that they would be closer than they are, but they have this weird power dynamic. Like they've literally been together, the only people together, for 5 years, and Gray is still completely loyal and takes every single command from him, doesn't argue with him, they don't talk like they're real friends, and that barrier, I think, just between like Prince and Guard never got broken despite them being the only two together for 5 years. Like it just didn't sit right, and I just wanted them to have a closer relationship than they did, and I wanted more scenes where they were, you know, vulnerable with each other, and you could really see that male friendship, but you really didn't get to see that. So I don't know, it's something maybe that'll like develop in further books, but I doubt it, just because they're separated now and they're both like vying for the same throne. So I don't know what's gonna happen. Another thing I didn't like was that Harper, her one motivation in this entire book is to get home to take care of her family. Like she loves her mother and brother so much, it's repeated over and over and over again, and yet she's happy and she just forgets all about them when she's in this kingdom. Like literally when Lilith offers her the chance home or reminds her that she could get a chance home, Harper's like, oh yeah, like I almost completely forgot, I was so happy here. And I was like, what? That is like your one motivation in this book and you just completely forgot about it? Like it, for that reason, I was just like, this is very not character driven at all, because Harper just like forgot her greatest desire like in the middle of the book because she's in like a fancy castle and she's falling in love with Ren, even though it doesn't feel like it because they talk not very much at all. So yeah, like even Ren, in terms of characterization, like we didn't get to know that much about him at all. Like we don't, like what do we find out really about his past? Like almost nothing. We don't really know anything like about his personality or what he's like in his free time, or like I don't know, it just felt like it was lacking depth. And I swear the author uses the word calculating a million times to describe him. I just got so annoying. I was like, yes, I get it, you think he's calculating. And I mean, this falls back to the issue of telling versus showing, and again, I think that's what really just made me not emotionally invested in their relationship, and I didn't understand how they could be in love. It's because they barely talked on the page. Like it was all off the page of when they were like actually falling in love. And like at the beginning of each chapter, Harper would like announce how she felt about Ren. Like the number of times she's like, oh, I thought he was an arrogant prince and I didn't like him because of that, but I can see now that he cares for his people. And I'm like, that's great, but can we show this instead? Like it just got old after a while that every single chapter it would be like, I think this about Ren now, and now I think this, and now I think this, and Yeah, it just, again, the number of times she used the word calculating just bugged me. Like every single chapter, I can tell his thoughts and actions are so calculated, so I don't trust him yet. Like, it just, I wanted so much more from this book than what it gave me. The last thing that really bugged me was Harper's not like other girls attitude throughout the book. And not even just necessarily her attitude, but Ren's attitude and Gray's attitudes toward her. They're like, oh my god, she's so different from these hundreds and hundreds of other women that they've kidnapped. But Harper is the only one with these certain qualities. Like, it just felt ridiculous after a point. Like, you're telling me that not one of these other hundreds of girls could ride a horse or was interested in learning, self-defense or fighting, or wanted to learn knife throwing, or tried to fight back and run away, or just anything like that. You're telling me Harper's the only one out of these hundreds of women like that? Like, it didn't feel believable at all. Like, not one of these other women didn't like dresses and wore the pants instead. Like, there were certain aspects like that where I was like, okay, this is a little ridiculous. It just didn't make sense. The things that are like, oh, Harper's the only one and I like her because she's not like other girls. And I'm like, what? No. Like, it just didn't make sense. Anyway, that was probably a long list of negatives about this book, but that being said, like, it was still enjoyable. I liked it. Like I said, like, the book is good. It's just not at that, like, great level that I was expecting it to be because of the hype. So let me know your thoughts down below. If you like this video, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video. Thanks, everyone. Bye.